All right, what is going on, everybody who's got the time to join? Welcome to a valued conversation, Gen X spoken word. So, tonight, what we're going to be talking about 10 years of Trump set us back 60 years. I don't know if anyone's taking the time to think about this, but Donald Trump has waged a war since 2015 on democracy, on blacks, on Hispanics, on civil rights, you name it. He is going after it in and of itself. I'm not going to give it away too soon here, folks. So we'll try and do this in maybe an hour and a half, a little bit longer. We'll see what goes on. But until then, let's go ahead and lean back for a second. Let's go with an old cut from the 90s. Heavy D at the boys, instrumental. If you can't see what I can see, all right, fair use, fair use. All right, let's go ahead and ease back and get this going. All right, so as I routinely have to tell folks, I am in an hour's deficit. So it doesn't matter what I do right now, whether folks join me or not on the live stream, I've still got to get my hours in. So we've got a long way to go to 3,000 hours to get monetized. So that means if I have to get up in the middle of the night through the course of the day, whether it's pre-recorded shows, or let's say if the replay gang joins me, we're going to get these hours done, folks, whether folks are here or not. But if you happen to show up, I greatly appreciate it nonetheless. Other than that, I'm just going to go ahead and do my monologue as I normally do. So let's go ahead and show our banner here. So as I said, Trump has damn near taken us back to the 1960s. We're almost back in the Jim Crow era, or at least that's what he's aiming for. And the only thing, or let me go ahead and let's bring that back. One of the many things that's going to get him there is going to be people not taking the time to vote. Something that you need to understand, people, is that if your vote was not important, they would not go through the trouble each voting cycle trying to find a way to suppress it. I'll say it again. If your vote was not important, there wouldn't be all of these shenanigans that the conservatives go through to keep people from voting. So I want you to keep that in mind going forward. So yes, your vote makes a difference. So getting away from that, again, 10 years of Trump set us back 60 years. So what do we commonly hear from Trump? Make America great again. Behind that, you get the statement, well, what made America great in the first place? Then you start tooling off into, Well, what does voting ever do for anyone? Then you get down to your specific races. Black, for instance, what is voting ever done for a black man? And all the other ridiculous statements that keep people from voting, but then everyone has something to say about their life situation or what came from that. If you don't vote, shut up. Miss us with this nonsense, all right? You've got the opportunity like everybody else, but if you don't partake in it, don't complain. So I return again. Make America great again. What was great about it? Well, to Donald Trump, America was great when when I guess blacks could be treated any old way that anyone who was non-black felt like treating them. That sounds like an equivocal statement, but the fact of the matter is that no, we had no rights. We were less than. We could be beaten, we could be whipped, we could be maimed, we could be lynched, and nothing was really in our power to be done about it until the mid 60s. But prior to that, yes, we had no rights. We were not recognized as citizens. And this is what Donald Trump's current purge of rules and regulations is moving us back to. The onslaught that he has on DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, which the Republicans deemed around mid 2004, or at least starting in 2024, to throw out the narrative, DEI didn't earn it. Yeah, we know that's a lie for the most part. We see multiple videos going out there claiming about, making claims about how affirmative action just allowed us to take the place of more qualified white candidates. And I've said many a time before, and has so as others like myself have stated, affirmative action did not give us positions. Affirmative action gave minorities the ability to be on the stage with everybody else in order to compete for the position. Now, when you start listening to this pseudo conservative logic, they start finding more and more ways to disparage and lie about the whole status of affirmative action in and of itself. Those who do not know affirmative action, who have not studied it, studied the outcome that has helped, that has been beneficial to folks, have no true understanding of it other than what they're told. You know what? Let me do this as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the comments on. I don't know if anyone's going to show up tonight or not, but again, if they don't, there's always the replay. So one more time. Make America great again. What made America great? What is it that Donald Trump is trying to get back to? Or better yet, I should say, under Donald Trump's public persona and presence since 2015, what has come back? What has reemerged under him? Now, before I say anything else, let's go ahead and do this. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get into the slide information that I normally present. And, we're not doing sound tonight. All right, so if anyone happens to show up in the chat, let me know if you hear any music or any echoes in the background. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and get into this. So after the 2020 election, judges by and far told Donald Trump, you lost. Anything you say right now is a lie that you are continually pushing. You did not win the election. All right, so this article, this is back from October 2022, when they had started actually going after Trump and his folks for attempting to overthrow the election. Judge, Trump knew vote fraud claims in legal documents were false. Former President Trump signed legal documents challenging the results of the 2020 election that included voter fraud claims he knew to be false, a federal judge said in a ruling Wednesday. And again, this is back from October 2022. U.S. District Court Judge David Carter, in an 18-page opinion, ordered the release of those emails between Trump and attorney John Eastman to the House committee investigating the 6th Jan attack on the Capitol. He said those communications cannot be withheld because they include evidence of potential crimes. The emails show that President Trump knew that the specific numbers of voter fraud were wrong, but continued to tout those numbers both in court and to the public, Carter wrote. So right now we're seeing the seeds of how everything got started. Well, actually it started before that. This is 2 years after the fact that Donald Trump or a year after the fact, that Donald Trump and his folks had attacked the Capitol building. Now think about this. We've got a president in the office right now who actively led an insurrection to overturn the government, or at least the results of the election, so he could stay in power. He got that taste of power from his first administration, and he wanted to stay. He enjoyed it. How do we know this? We look at the second administration that we're under right now, and anything that he did not finish the first time around, he is getting it done this time. But the judges did point out, you are lying. You knew you were wrong. But it seems that, look around, no one really cares. Now that is a problem. So that being said, we'll proceed on to the next here. Here's another judge. Federal judge says Trump has responsibility for January 6th, calling rioter a pawn. Now, this is when Trump's lackeys, or the folks he supposedly did not call to arms to come to Washington, were in the courtrooms and trials. President Trump said that he needed us here. The judge obviously doesn't buy this. You came of your own accord. I'm just paraphrasing some of the conversations from the articles that I've seen here. But the judges said the responsibility is on you as an individual. You took it upon yourself to come. Even though Donald Trump told you that he wanted you to come there and to come for a wild time, you as an individual still made the choice. A federal judge suggested Friday that former President Donald Trump had some responsibility for the January 6th attack on the Capitol, and that rioters were pawns provoked into action. So this one is from November 19, 2021. Speaking at sentencing hearing for rioter John Lolos, the judge said rally-goers like him were called to Washington, D.C. by an elected official, prompted to walk to the Capitol by an elected official. Judge Amit Mehta called individuals who stormed the building a pawn in the game played by people who know better. People like Mr. Lolos were told lies, were told falsehoods, were told the election was stolen when it was not, Mehta said. Regrettably, people like Mr. Lolos who were told those lies took it to heart, and they are the ones paying the consequences. Now, I want you to think about this in an upcoming article that I'm going to mention that's going to discuss about how the folks, or the guys on the ground, or the actual rioters, were the ones who were facing consequences. But the organizers of that insurrection still have yet to see any type of consequence as a result. Think of all the people questioned close to the president in his cabinet who to this day have not seen any type of consequence for their actions. If anything, they've just folded and just scooted right back into the crowd, and it's just another day. Those who created the conditions that led to Mr. Lolo's conduct have, in no meaningful measure, been held accountable. He said, you were a pawn. You were a pawn in the game played by people who know better. Okay, I'd read that again. This is what I truly cannot understand. When you look at this at face value, you know that Donald Trump was guilty. No ifs, ands, or buts. But we allow the aspect of politics to insulate us. So when I say us, to insulate those in power. All the foot soldiers go to jail, but the mob bosses end up getting a deal. They get immunity, or they get away altogether and turn around and get reelected 4 years later. Now, this article is from May 2023, and it's from Crew. I always forget the name of this organization, but nonetheless, here, 9 different judges blame Trump for January 6th. 9. Now, remember, he had lost about 60 cases back to back. Oh, we're going to have the lawyers ready to go. And he did have lawyers ready to go. And to no avail, 60 cases down the drain. I think Donald Trump won maybe one of those cases, but it wasn't anything meaningful to garner a victory to overturn the results. But there was no merit to his lie of the election was stolen from him. But still, he talked about it. He convinced others that it was stolen. Hence, January 6th took place. Now, there's no need for me to go back here and talk about what we already know to be fact. Plus, most of you know how to read anyway. But the Stop the Steal rally was one of many lead-ups until January 6th took place. Stop the Steal was one. Remember, there was 2,000 Mules, a movie that was put out. There was also the lies Rudy Giuliani was telling. Remember the two workers who were harassed? Trump officials going to this woman's house, giving her grief. Lies being told by Giuliani that, there's a thumb drive. See, they used that to help steal or change votes. And it turned out to be nothing more than some type of buttermint candy, something along the lines. But it was still a moment that Giuliani used to push the lie. So let me go ahead and click here. So what we're looking at now are all the judges who came out and said that Donald Trump, you are lying. Here we go. Let's do this for a second here, folks. Let me turn. There we go. I'm just going to go ahead and pause the music right about now. All right. So Judge Rudolph Contreras, he says the events of January 6th involved a rather unprecedented confluence of events spurred by then President Trump and a number of his prominent allies who bear much responsibility for what occurred on that day. And as this list goes on, more commentary is added by these judges. This is Judge Amit Mehta. Woo, he got a lot in on that one. Let's see if there's something a little shorter. The fact remains that he and others were called to Washington, D.C. by an elected official. He was prompted to walk to the Capitol by an elected official. People like Mr. Lolos were told lies, fed falsehoods, and told that our election was stolen when clearly it was not. That was just from a previous article we just read on one of the earlier tabs here. And we have Judge Amy Berman Jackson. The steady drumbeat that inspired defendants to take up arms has not faded away. 6 months later, the canard that the election was stolen is being repeated daily on major news outlets and from the corridors of power in state and federal government, not to mention the near daily fulminations of the former president. So we can see how serious this is. We can see that Donald Trump was not going to let up, even though he had said himself, oh, we were so close. An open admission, not that he meant to make it. He did not mean to make it, but he did. Still, his believers, what else do you call them? His believers still chose to believe they stole it from Donald. Now, here we are 4 years later, and we're watching democracy catching a buzzsaw to it almost every day. But the information is there telling everyone he lied, it was not stolen. So where do we go from here? So as I said before, make America great again. Donald Trump wants to get back to something. What is it that he's trying to get back to? Or better yet, what has now reemerged based on Donald Trump wanting to go back to a time period where he felt America was great? So here's the first thing that I want to say that has come back under the auspices of Donald Trump. We have the reemergence of the Confederacy. Now, I've said this for the last 5 or 6 months, even longer, but people think I'm joking. We are now looking at a modern day Confederacy. The Republicans have been playing the long game since 1866. And I blame this current situation on a few things in history. But the first and foremost, the blame goes to the Union Army for not finishing the job and ensuring that every aspect of the uprising, aka the insurrection from the southern states that started the Civil War, was stomped out. They did not do that. And as a result, what you have now are people who are responsible. And again, we're not talking about the soldiers, those who were killed or those who survived, who met consequences. We're talking about people like Robert E. Lee, other generals just like himself, who were allowed to return back into the folds after attempting to overthrow the country. It was almost as if they were saying, "Hey, Rob, good try, man, but next time you may succeed. But in the meantime, let's do this. Let's build locations. Let's put up statues. Let's put up monuments so we can let people always remember that when the South fought the Civil War, we did it for good Southern tradition." So the lost cause narrative was thus born, and has been perpetuated ever since. So this is an article from the Milwaukee Independent, and you would be hard pressed not to believe what is being said here. Failure to punish Confederates after the Civil War created culture of impunity that shields Trump today. And this is from the 8th of October. This is a recent. Forgiveness was offered not as reconciliation with the enslaved millions who suffered, but with the very men who led a rebellion to preserve slavery. That choice to extend amnesty to traitors while abandoning Reconstruction created a tradition of impunity that has repeated across American history. From Robert E. Lee's rehabilitation as a national hero to Donald Trump's survival of 2 impeachments and the aftermath of January 6th, the United States has repeatedly chosen to protect elites who defy democratic order rather than confront them with consequences for their treason. And that's pretty much what it was. Absolute and outright treason. It's bad enough that Donald Trump, and with his first meeting with Zelensky, was extortion, but he got away with it. Clearly, he was guilty of extortion. Then shortly thereafter, beating that rap, we have January 6th. We're back into it again. And once more, Donald Trump beats the rap because Republicans refuse to hold him responsible. Just like this article is saying, there was no consequence that Donald Trump was ever going to face as long as he had the Republicans of today backing him. Now, the last time that I can think of a Republican who was held accountable by both Republicans and also by the Democrats to a large degree was probably Watergate. Even though the Democrats and Republicans back then had different ideas, they still knew what democracy was and what it took to uphold it. Hence why we saw that Nixon skedaddled, because he knew that he was going to be impeached. Or, dare I say, even suffered more consequences other than that. But nonetheless, he knew his goose was cooked and he flew. But again, starting back at the Civil War, as this article is stating, The lack of accountability allowed Robert E. Lee to return to the halls of education, uh, to return to government in a minor role wherever he went to, and he pretty much just melded back into the fold. As I was saying before, oh, good job, Rob. You almost had him. I can imagine folks telling him that. In 1865, when the Union had the opportunity to dismantle the power of the slaveholding class, it faltered. Former Confederates regained political influence within a decade, and symbols of their rebellion were repurposed as instruments of white identity. Monuments, school names, and popular histories softened the image of insurrectionists while erasing the brutality of slavery. This amnesty was not only political but cultural, embedding into the nation's DNA the idea that white-led rebellion against federal authority could be forgiven, even honored, so long as it cloaked itself in tradition and respectability. Hence again, the overtold Southern story, the lost cause narrative. We fought for honor. We fought for tradition. We fought for states' rights. But no, we never fought against slavery. And that's the lie that is still perpetrated to this day. If you were to have this conversation in a room full of conservatives about what the Civil War was fought over, they'll simply say it was states' rights. Never will they admit it was slavery, because as is stated here, as long as you cloak yourself in tradition and respectability, you can tell any lie you want. You can tell any story. Dare I even say it that way? You can tell whatever story you want. Even back then, as it was now, I could bet somebody stood in the White House, in the halls of Congress, the Senate, stating that the Civil War was nothing more than just a disagreement. It was legitimate political discourse. This pattern has reemerged in modern form. When Trump encouraged supporters to fight like hell before the storming of the Capitol, when he lost his reelection bid in 2020, the attack struck at the heart of constitutional governance. And from out of that, we also see that Donald Trump got away again. Now, keep in mind, when Judge Cannon cut Trump loose, and that's just how I'm putting this, 34 counts he had right on his back, mishandling classified, being the predominant one. Remember, he had rooms full of classified documents, bedrooms, bathrooms, ballrooms, all of it right there. None of it that was his. He felt that, well, I'm the president, and when I leave, that's mine. I'm taking it with me. And she held the door open long enough until the Supreme Court created precedents for him. And once they created that precedence for him and he cut loose, that was pretty much it. And then what came from that? He got into the White House. He was able to make all the charges against him go away. Project 2025 took place, and we started seeing more and more white supremacists come out in the open, to include even more coming into his administration. There was nothing they had to fear at this point in time. Everything that they wanted was found right here in this one white supremacist supporting president that is now in the halls of power. Let's continue on just one or two more paragraphs, and we'll get down to the list here. Fox News, right-wing talk radio, and online networks serve the same function Confederate monuments once did. They provide legitimacy to rebellion by reframing it as honor. The Marble Lee on horseback of the 20th century has become the viral clip on repeat in the 21st. Both serve the same purpose, to normalize defiance of federal authority and elevate its leaders to cultural sainthood. The Confederacy's heritage argument has been reborn as patriotism, but the mechanism of memory remains identical. So again, folks, the name of this article, Failure to Punish Confederates After the Civil War Created Culture of Impunity That Shields Trump Today. And this is by the Milwaukee Independent. So again, on the first thing on the list here, as I mentioned, what has come back under Trump? Reemergence of the Confederacy. The South, folks, has actually risen again. So what does that lead us into? Well, it leads us to the second reemergence, and that is the unabashed reemergence of overt white supremacist support from the White House. Now, believe it or not, Trump is not the first, but people will always argue Trump is not a racist. He's not a white supremacist. Really? Well, before we focus too much on that, let me just show you this. Now, this is from the site Capitol in Maine. Presidential White Power is the name of this. Now, this came out August of 2020. White supremacy is as American as the Constitution and as presidential as the marbled halls of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The White House, constructed with the labor of more than 200 African-American slaves, shows that from the very beginning, the phrase "all men are created equal" applied only to white male citizens. Unfortunately, white supremacy within this building is not only part of its foundation, but of its legacy. So a lot of this I'm going to leave for you guys to pick and read through here, because I have a whole lot more information that I want to share with you. I want to try and make sure I do this in the next 30 minutes. So let's look at a statement from Andrew Johnson. And if you look it up, yes, Andrew Johnson did actually make this statement. This is a country for white men. And by God, as long as I am president, it shall be a government for white men. Doesn't mix any words there, does he not? Now, of course, he is not the only one. Woodrow Wilson is here as well. I think he was responsible for being, did he screen it in the White House? Yeah, here we go. A half century later, President Woodrow Wilson hosted a screening of Birth of a Nation in the White House. The film is a cinematic adaptation of The Klansman, the second novel of a trilogy that depicts Ku Klux Klan members as romantic heroes who saved the nation from freed American slaves and the chaos they unleashed upon their former masters. The film and the book promoted the Lost Cause movement, whose pseudo-historical ideology claimed that the Civil War was not primarily about slavery and its abolition, but was about Southern states' rights. Now, recall, I just mentioned that, didn't I? States' right is what they're going to fall back on. Here, Herbert Hoover supported and encouraged the illegal deportations of Mexicans and Mexican Americans. His administration used the slogan, "American jobs for real Americans." Now, again, these are presidents, and they're doing this from inside the White House. After World War I, white supremacists within the federal government turned their attention to immigration. President Calvin Coolidge signed the Immigration Act of 1924, legislation co-authored by Congressman Albert Johnson, a eugenicist who opposed interracial marriage and immigration. The bill was inspired by eugenics race theories that heavily favored migration from the racially superior Northern European countries. In his first address to Congress, President Coolidge said, "America must be kept American." Now, again, I'm up here by myself reading all of this. But for those of you who get wind of this, checking this out in the replay game, make sure that you share this. All right, put this out here and make sure that others know. What I may end up doing is having another premiere with this information, just to see if I can get a wider berth with it. But for right now, just understand here that white supremacy has always been a part of the White House. No one calls it out because it'll appear as being either un-American, biased, or you hate America. No, it's not that anyone hates America. Even over the weekend through the No Kings protest, Mike Johnson making the claims that, oh, these people hate America. No, those people out protesting did not hate America. They dislike the direction that the country is going under the current administration, which is backwards. That's what they hate. Let's take a look here at the Great Depression. The Great Depression would offer yet another opportunity to mix white supremacist thought and immigration policy. Due to the soaring unemployment rates throughout the country, Mexicans and Mexican Americans were targeted and blamed for the economic crisis. In 1929, President Herbert Hoover's administration helped forcibly repatriate or deport as many as 1.8 million Mexican and Mexican Americans to Mexico. About 60% were American citizens. Now, again, how much of this information do you actually hear? We don't hear it in college. We don't hear it in grade school. Or let me retract that. We don't hear it in college unless we take specific courses. And even then, you may not hear it. I don't recall hearing this information in my undergrad. I found out a majority of what I discuss on my platform through my own research. And when you find one thing, you pull on that thread, you start getting more and more information. People don't realize how prominent Herbert Hoover was in pushing people towards civil rights. They have not a clue. In 1953, Dwight Eisenhower launched Operation, well, you can read it for yourself, a military-style deportation campaign aimed at Mexicans and Mexican Americans. Now, notice the main thing here, what are we seeing here? Everybody is targeting the Mexican population. Fact, one of the first, we'll say immigration laws that came out, or immigration acts, was the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. And the reason this act was implemented is because during that time frame, it was noticed that there were more people who are either Chinese, Irish, you name it, coming from Italian, coming from other countries than whites. And as a result, they said, well, we've got to stop somebody. So the Chinese were the first that they slapped with this immigration. Oh, is bad. You're immigrating. You're ruining the country. You need to go, or we need to restrict how many of you come in, because the jobs that the settlers would not do, the Chinese would do for cheaper. Because of the fact that wages could be paid less to immigrants, those in power decided, okay, we need to stop immigrants from coming to the country. And this was one of the earliest measures that was utilized. Excuse me. But let's step back here for a moment. Remember Japanese internment. On February 19th, 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, allowing the U.S. government to forcibly relocate and incarcerate more than 117,000 Japanese and Japanese Americans in concentration camps after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. The executive order was challenged as unconstitutional in the U.S. Supreme Court, but it was ultimately upheld. Associate Justice Hugo Black wrote the majority opinion in favor, of supporting the order. Black, a Roosevelt appointee, had belonged to the Ku Klux Klan before his political and legal career. Dissenting Associate Justice Frank Murray wrote that the executive order falls into the ugly abyss of racism and represented the legalization of racism. The concentration camps remained in operation until 1946. 4 years. And as we go through this, we see some of the slogans here. The lost cause for states' rights. America must be kept American. American jobs for real Americans. The war on drugs. I believe that was Nixon. Make America great again. Before Donald Trump used that, Ronald Reagan used that in his campaign for the presidency in 1980. How many of you didn't know that, huh? In 1964, Lyndon Johnson's signing of the historic Civil Rights Act challenged decades of white supremacy. Unfortunately, we now know that many of LBJ's private and off-the-record conversations were laced with racial slurs to describe African Americans. Now, I did a show on this a while back that stated that depending upon who Lyndon B. Johnson was in the room with, the slur either went from Negra, to nigger, to Negro, but mostly it was Negra. So the idea here is that maybe he was hustling folks. He was campaigning using different pronunciations of the word to push people into getting his work done, which was to get the Civil Rights Act passed. Now, I recall Candace Owens saying, Lyndon B. Johnson didn't really want to sign that. They were twisting his arm. Be that none as it was. As the president, you either have the choice to do it or not to do it. But for whatever reason, LBJ decided that he was going to support civil rights. Some people say it was because of the fact he saw the writing on the wall and realized there was no point in him trying to fight it anymore, being that civil rights was going to happen, whether he was a part of it or not. But everybody wants, let me take that back, certain people want to be on the right side of history. And regardless of what LBJ's thoughts and behaviors were, his last actions did put him on the right side of history, although still questionable. Donald Trump's administration seems to be resurrecting the long historical line of blatant, unabashed support for white supremacy. And it kills me when you tell people that this is a white supremacist administration. And you give them the points, but still they deny it. Number one, Donald Trump flew Charlie Kirk's body back to Phoenix, Arizona on Air Force Two. Air Force Two became white supremacist Airlines United for the moment. The second thing, Donald Trump had all flags flown at half staff for white supremacist Charlie Kirk. And number three, the vice president of the United States broadcasted a white supremacist TV show out of the White House, Charlie Kirk's show. How can anyone sit here and deny that we are not under a white supremacist presidency? Today, President Donald Trump's administration seems to be resurrecting the long historical line of blatant, unabashed support for white supremacy. From the day of its launch in 2015, Trump's first presidential campaign reverberated with the wailing of anti-immigrant xenophobia. They're bringing drugs, he said of Mexican immigrants. They're bringing crime. They're rapists. Trump's then chief strategist was Steve Bannon, the executive chairman of Breitbart News, the self-proclaimed platform for the alt-right, a term created by white nationalist Richard Spencer to describe a far-right movement centered on white nationalism. Although President-elect Donald Trump would disavow the alt-right movement and Bannon denied being a white nationalist, the stage was set for the Trump administration's acceptance of white supremacy and white supremacists. So this thing can't be hid. We sit here and listen to them play, you call anyone a Nazi who has a different idea than you do. But yet just the last week or so, or last 2 weeks, we've seen what these Republicans actually think of us being black folks, the watermelon people. All of the chat showed us exactly what I'm talking about right here. It confirms what has always been the case. The bigotry is primarily on the side of the conservatives. But if you say that, you're lying. There's nothing that proves this. You're just spreading your hate and bias. You hate America. Sure. So one of the things that I did ask Google, I asked the question of Which 6 American presidents have been associated with white supremacy or eugenics? Now, we already covered a few of them, but this is the outcome that came back. Many presidents throughout U.S. history have been associated with white supremacist views, pro-slavery policies, or the eugenics movement, which advocated for selective breeding and forced sterilization. The question of which presidents could be considered white supremacists is complex, as it involves evaluating historical figures based on modern standards and acknowledging the pervasive nature of racism and eugenics at different times. But that being said, they still managed to find a few. Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, Calvin Coolidge, Herbert Hoover. If I mispronounce a few words, folks, I've got my braces in. Remember, Andrew Johnson was a part of this. Rutherford B. Hayes was a part of this. Donald Trump was also a part of this, but you're not going to see it on this particular list. Again, they just grabbed a few of the names that were out there. Here we go. I'm going to take a moment to put this over here. Now, this was a web page that I was finding on my phone using my Android, but for whatever reason, when I tried to do the same search on my computer, it wouldn't come off properly. So I just ended up downloading the page and then emailing it over here. So we have Andrew Johnson, promotion of racist ideology. Johnson openly used white supremacist rhetoric, stating in one instance, "This is a country for white men, and by God, as long as I am president, it should be a government for white men." He obstructed racial equality. And what's his legacy? Johnson's efforts were designed to prevent Black Americans from achieving equal citizenship and to continue their subjugation, an agenda that led to his impeachment. Rutherford B. Hayes. Now recall, when we had the Republicans and the Democrats both claiming that they won the Civil War, it was through the agreement, which is more or less a Faustian deal, that the Southern Democrats said, hey, if you guys want the presidency, that's fine. In exchange of us relinquishing the presidency to the Republicans, we want you to pull all of the Union troops out of the South. And this goes back to that article from the Milwaukee Independent, where it was stated that once the Union Army had moved out, the Southern officers 10 years later were able to move back in society and reclaim their positions, and thus entered Jim Crow. Abandoning civil rights. Funny you should mention that. Hayes' decision reversed the social and political progress made by African Americans after the Civil War and ushered in the era of Jim Crow laws, which systemically disenfranchised Black citizens. So recall, starting in 1866 up to 1877, that was the Reconstruction period where Blacks saw prominence when they were integrated into Southern society. They were doctors, they were lawyers, they were teachers, they were congressmen. All of that went to pot and was stripped away once Jim Crow started. We have Theodore Roosevelt, belief in racial hierarchy. Roosevelt adhered to the belief that white Americans were the forward race and were responsible for civilizing supposedly backward races. Anyone resembling me? Mixed record on race. While he appointed some Black Americans to prominent positions and caused an outcry by inviting Booker T. Washington to dinner at the White House, he also held views of Black inferiority. In 1906, without a trial, he dishonorably discharged 3 companies of Black soldiers accused of a shooting spree in Brownsville, Texas, an act he refused to reverse, even as evidence mounted against the charges. Woodrow Wilson, segregating the workforce, supporting white supremacy and policy, defending racist policies. Richard Nixon, the Southern strategy. Now, on numerous shows, many folks have heard me go over the Southern strategy. You've heard me point out how it worked. Let's read a bit of it right here. Nixon's 1968 presidential campaign used a Southern strategy to appeal to conservative white voters by exploiting racial issues. He used coded language such as law and order to critique civil rights protesters and suggest that he would slow down school integration. Divisive rhetoric. By using language that played on racial fears and resentment, Nixon created a political realignment that contributed to a long-term shift in party alliances. Now, by this time, Nixon was beginning his Southern strategy exploits. 3 years earlier, in 1965, you already had seen the party switch, or the great switch as they call it. This is one of the things that the Republicans will still not acknowledge, because to acknowledge the switch of the party ideologies would mean that they no longer can cast themselves as the party of Lincoln. Nothing irks me more than when I hear Black conservatives talk about, I can think of that honorable conservative, pick one, Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was a true Republican. And it irks me listening to that, because even though Douglass was a Republican, as he calls it out, he was not the Republican that we see in office who call themselves Republicans today. He was nowhere near that. If anything, if Frederick Douglass were alive, he would be Democrat, because the Democrats are for civil rights. And last but not least on this list, we have Donald Trump, the birther conspiracy, rhetoric on immigration, Charlottesville. Oh, they're good people on both sides. Or actually, here we go. They were fine people on both sides. We don't need to go into that. But again, here's the second thing that has reemerged since Donald Trump has come onto the scene since 2015, the reemergence of white supremacist support from the White House. So what's the third thing that has come back under Donald Trump? Yeah, say that. Well, the third thing that has come back has been the reemergence of anti-vaccination culture. We remove some of this. So I asked the question, how prevalent was anti-vax culture in the 19th century? Anti-vaccination sentiment was widespread in the 19th century, particularly in Europe and the United States, as governments began to mandate the smallpox vaccine. The anti-vaccination movement grew into a formidable force, with organized leagues, public demonstrations, and publications spreading objections that echo modern anti-vaccine arguments. So, of course, you had civil liberties that people claim that were being violated. The one thing I need to point out here is that George Washington had the entire Continental Army vaccinated for smallpox. Nobody complained. However, when you start looking at the methodologies that they were using for vaccination or attempted vaccination down the road, I think some would have been anti-vaxxers at that particular point in time. But we know that, vaccinations and the approach towards achieving them improved through time. But in the very beginning, it was pretty ruddy. So how did they do this? There was one line in particular. Well, let's do this. Medical concerns. Side effects. Early smallpox vaccines were crude and sometimes had serious side effects, such as infections like syphilis or hepatitis, because the lymph used was often taken from the vaccination sores of other people. Vaccination sores. Again, as I said, I probably would have been an anti-vaxxer back then, at least in the first 20 or 30 years, because of how they went about it. Contamination fears. There was a widespread fear that using matter from infected cows would transmit animal diseases and cause vaccinated people to develop cow-like characteristics. There was also an aspect where they talked about having pus from a vaccinated person be rubbed up or put into the arm of a non-vaccinated person. So you can see why you had any pushback for how smallpox, or should I say how vaccinations were initially done. But as we know, the process improved itself. Or I wouldn't say it improved itself, but the process was improved. So feel free to go back over this information, folks. But again, this is the question regarding anti-vax. And as I said here, this was a reemergence under Donald Trump. So if we have the reemergence of anti-vaxxing going on, or anti-vaccination culture, that means that we've got the return of some diseases, right? So what's the fourth thing that has come back during the time of Donald Trump? The reemergence of measles as a threat. Now, remember, the measles were considered to have been eradicated in 2000. Yeah, in 2000. But as of October 2025, there have been 1,500 cases that have been identified. So far, 1,573. Oh, that's a little bit higher. Excuse me. 1,573 cases have been reported in the U.S. this year, marking the highest number since measles was declared eliminated in 2000. News coverage of the measles might have faded away, but the outbreaks are happening nonetheless. All right, so what's the fifth thing that has reemerged under Donald Trump? The reemergence of lawlessness, primarily presidential lawlessness. So I typed in Trump defies this one. Trump defies judges' orders and deportation. This was just some of the things I knew that Trump or that would garner information on the lawlessness that we're seeing from Donald Trump right now. Key allegations of judicial defiance. Deportation of Venezuelans via the Alien Enemies Act. The order. In March 2025, U.S. District Judge James Boasberg issued a temporary restraining order to stop the deportation of alleged Venezuelan gang members to El Salvador under the Alien Enemies Act. The judge specifically ordered 2 deportation flights to be returned to the U.S. Now, granted, these flights were not supposed to take off at all, but the Trump administration said, "Who are you? No, you're just the judge. I'm the president," and he put them in the air. The defiance. Administration officials did not turn the planes around. As a result, Judge Boasberg later found probable cause for criminal contempt against the administration, stating officials showed willful disregard for his order. The outcome: an appeals court later overturned Boasberg's contempt ruling, but the incident highlighted a significant clash between the executive and judicial branches. I can't think of a clearer example of lawlessness than literally the president deciding to go against the judge. And even right now, nothing has happened. Nothing has come back because of that one moment where it was overturned and it was considered dead and done. And we've seen Donald Trump just grow bolder and bolder with his level of defiance. All right, so what is the last thing that we can say that has reemerged since Donald Trump came back on the scene, or came onto the scene in 2015? The reemergence of yellow journalism. Now, I recall first hearing yellow journalism in my, I want to say in my elementary school days, and probably up until maybe freshman, sophomore year of high school. You read about it here and there along the way, but yellow journalism was an actual thing here that was fabricated, exaggerated news that was put forth just to get people to buy newspapers. So, of course, I asked the question, what was yellow journalism? To give some context for those of you who never heard the expression. Yellow journalism was a sensationalist style of newspaper reporting from the late 19th century that used exaggerated stories, eye-catching headlines, and dramatic images to sell papers and influence public opinion. It prioritized drama and entertainment over factual accuracy, and its name likely came from the popularity of the Yellow Kid comic strip. This style of reporting significantly influenced public opinion and political events, most notably the Spanish-American War. What are the characteristics of yellow journalism? Sensationalism, emphasize scandals, crime, and emotional stories to excite the public. Exaggerated headlines, used scare headlines in large print to grab attention. Faked and misleading information, including fake interviews, and sometimes presented false information as fact. But hold on, anyone who's in the replay game, just wait for it. Visual emphasis, lavishly used pictures and imaginary drawings with a focus on color Sunday supplements that often contain superficial articles and comics. Frame narratives, portrayed events with a strong bias, often casting the underdog against the system or creating clear good guys and bad guys. Good guys wear white, bad guys wear black. Now you can see a little bit further along the way, it goes into a little bit more information about how yellow journalism had influenced the Spanish-American War. But I want you to take this for a second and let's look at yellow journalism in the 21st century. I'm going to go ahead and call it out as it is. Fox News, One America News, Newsmax, Breitbart, Epoch Times, the Washington Examiner, New York Post. Now, these would be examples of what we would call modern day yellow journalism. Now, I can guarantee you right now, if anyone from the other side of the aisle is seeing this, they're going down the list saying CNN, ABC, MSNBC, Guardian, Reuters, AP News, NPR. No, those, with the exception, they'll say, of MSNBC, but still, the majority of what I just listed right here, as far as the left-wing side of the house for newspaper articles or organizations, NPR, Reuters, ABC, or I forgot to mention C-SPAN, these are folks who are considered legitimate and above board. Remember, media bias fact check. If you want to see what type of information that you are reading, you can check that information at this site and verify what you are putting out into the ether or what you are reading for yourself. I probably need to do another show on that. But nonetheless, yellow journalism is predominantly what we're dealing with right now. If you recall from the Milwaukee Independent article, no longer is it a thing of monuments or statues that relate the false stories. You now have digital media that does this, and it's done through the entities that I just mentioned or initially mentioned: Fox, Newsmax, One America News, Breitbart, New York Post, Washington Examiner, Epoch Times, Red State, the Daily Signal, Daily Wire. You can just go through this and see how there's always some type of exaggerated lie that's told. The election was stolen. Oh, the voting machines have been tampered with. And we saw that lie cost Fox News $700 and some odd $million. But you would think they'd have taken the lesson to heart. I don't think so, because they are still lying right now. Just the other day, Jesse Waters had someone from Antifa. He had someone else who was supposed to be some other type of character whose face was hidden. 3 times we saw some person come up and claim to be part of some type of radical group. And it turned out to be someone from Fox News that Jesse Waters had dressing up to be all these characters. Now, we just read this about how you had false and fake interviews. Perfect example. Now, what is the purpose of all this that's going on right now? So we have people celebrating the fact that Donald Trump is reversing all the advancements that have been made since the 1960s. So technically, if we speak about it, we are looking at the end of the second Reconstruction period starting in 1965 up to 2025. So again, we got a period of another 60 years that have gone by where there has been advancements amongst Blacks, Hispanics, Asians, Muslims. We've seen advancements. We've seen people assume positions in government, whether it be local, whether it be state. We've seen achievements in education, in science, or we'll say STEM. All throughout, we've seen that, but we're now being limited by the bigotry we're seeing that is calling Black history divisive, racist, revisionist. We're seeing institutions such as law firms being extorted to whereas they're giving away $200 million worth of pro bono services, paying fines to the Trump administration in order to keep their security clearances. We're seeing universities being told you cannot have the funding that is already allotted to you unless you change your curriculum. And we need you to sign this paper right here since you won't teach DEI. There will not be any critical race theory. There won't be XYZ. But nonetheless, you sign this, we will give you your funding. This is what I call Trump DEI: division, extortion, and intimidation. But no one's batting an eye to this. The man who attacked the country, who was dead to rights, who had immunity created for him to get him out of the trouble that he'd gotten himself into. And he is now burning the government down around us. What's that thing that Donald Trump likes to say? We're doing everything we are right now because we want to get back to a merit-based system. Okay, that's bullshit. Because the whole reason why we had civil rights, we had the Civil Rights Division that was instilled inside of the Department of Justice. We had the Voting Rights Act. These three things initially were being done because there was no merit to be seen at all. Merit did not exist, hence why you needed that aspect to be put together. Again, the Civil Rights Division inside of the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And these acts, which were put in place, were again merit to be added to the system when there was none previously. So for Donald Trump to say that we're trying to get back to a merit-based system, that is a damn lie. What they're trying to do right now is to take away the even playing field that was put in place. That's all that we're seeing right now. The playing field is being undone. Now, keep in mind, we have affirmative action that also followed those initial three actions I mentioned. Affirmative action, Operation Push, the Rainbow Coalition. Now, the other two, Operation Push, Rainbow Coalition, may not be seen as impactful as affirmative action, Civil Rights Act, or the 1965 Voting Rights Act, but understand it was still a thing of people that come together to make change. So Donald Trump, as I said in my statement, so if you go back out to the initial, what is that I'm looking for? I have a moment of cranial flatulence. In the description, but in the description, I made the statement: Donald Trump hasn't just undermined democracy. His political malevolence has cracked the entire foundation of progress in America directly to the ground beneath. And he's been able to do all of this in the span of 10 years. Now, granted, when he started harassing Obama with the birther movement, all this nonsense, that was him initially shooting the first volley. Donald Trump had nothing to say about any of the other presidents prior to Barack Obama. But as soon as the black man got in office, Donald Trump sprung into action. You might even say that the main thing that made Donald Trump want to be president was when Obama dressed him down at the correspondence dinner, as he should have, for the constant harassment, almost 2 years of harassment that he levied against Barack Obama. And the one time he gets what's coming to him, he reacts in a childish manner. He didn't blow up out front, but he took it, damn you Negro, I'll show you. And it's the thing, show him what? You were the one who started it. And of course, Trump, being the poor loser, runs for president. We think it's a joke, but the moment he starts beating out all of the other folks running for president, it becomes serious. This is a grudge. It's always been a grudge. It will continue to be a grudge. But make no mistake, folks, Donald Trump has taken us back. So I'll go ahead and read through the list one more time of what Donald Trump has done trying to make America great again, meaning trying to go back to a time where to him America was great. But instead, what he's done is taken us back in time, literally. So what has Trump taken us back to, or should I say, what has reemerged in the 10 years Donald Trump has been on the political field? We have the reemergence of the Confederacy. We have the unabashed reemergence of overt white supremacist support from the White House. We have the reemergence of anti-vaccination culture. We have the reemergence of measles, which again was declared eradicated back in 2000. We have the reemergence of lawlessness, especially seen from the president. And we have the reemergence of yellow journalism. These are things that have come back with a vengeance under Donald Trump. Well, all right, folks, I've got nothing more to add to this. It's a late one, as I said before, so I didn't have anyone here but myself tonight, but that's okay. We've got the replay gang, so guys, come through, check it out. Give me some comments if you have any questions. As I said before, if there's anything you would like me to cover, let me know. You know how to reach out and catch me. So I think it's going to go ahead and do this for me tonight, folks. So let's go ahead and end it like we normally do. If you like it, let me know. Share it if you do. And subscribe if this is what you're looking for. I'll see everyone later. John Henry out.